The price of lies. Part 1. I've always prided myself on being a good judge of character. When I married Derek Harmon 8 years ago, I was convinced I'd found a diamond in the rough. A hard-working, ambitious man who'd build a life with me in our modest Portland suburb. Funny how confidence can be the precursor to catastrophe. My name is Olivia Harmon, and until 3 days ago I thought I knew my husband. It started with a notification. One innocent little ping from my phone while I was organizing files at Lambert & Associates, the accounting firm where I've worked for the past decade. I should have been focused on the Peterson audit, but tax season had just ended, and my brain desperately needed a social media break. Melissa Carter has tagged Derek Harmon in 3 photos. I didn't recognize the name. Curious, I clicked, expecting to see some work conference photos. Derek had left for Chicago 3 days ago for what he described as the most boring financial planning symposium known to mankind. He'd even sent me a picture of the hotel lobby the night he arrived. The photos weren't from Chicago. My stomach dropped as I stared at my husband, my husband, with his arm around a tanned blonde woman on a pristine white beach. Behind them stretched the unmistakable turquoise waters of some tropical paradise. The location tag read, Dreams Resort and Spa, Cancun. That can't be current, I whispered to myself, ignoring the concerned glance from my colleague Jen in the neighboring cubicle. I checked the timestamp, posted 37 minutes ago. The caption read, Beach day with this handsome man. #blessed, #vacation vibes, #couple goals. My hands trembled as I scrolled through her profile. There were several more photos. Derek and this woman, Melissa, at dinner on a yacht, sharing what appeared to be a very passionate kiss at sunset. Liv, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Jen peered over our shared cubicle wall, her expression concerned. I'm fine, I managed, quickly locking my phone. Just remembered I forgot to pay the electric bill. Must be some bill, she said skeptically. As soon as Jen returned to her work, I grabbed my purse and headed for the bathroom. Once safely locked in a stall, I called Derek. No answer. I texted, How's the conference? 3 minutes later my phone buzzed, boring as expected. Miss you. In sessions all day. I stared at the message, a strange calm settling over me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't an old photo. This was my husband in Mexico with another woman, while I was pinching pennies to make our mortgage payment. I called in sick for the remainder of the day. When I got home, our modest 2-story colonial seemed different somehow, like I was seeing it through new eyes. The house we'd scraped and saved for, the one Derek had insisted we could afford despite my concerns about the steep monthly payments. Our wedding photo hung in the hallway. Derek in his navy suit, me in my mother's restored wedding dress. We'd been so young, so full of plans. Had it all been a lie? I sat at our kitchen table, opened my laptop and began to dig. First I checked our joint account. The balance was lower than it should have been, but nothing that screamed, expensive Mexican vacation. Then I remembered, Derek had his own separate account for his side business ventures. He'd always been vague about those. Without thinking twice, I went to his office upstairs. Derek was meticulous about his paperwork, organizing everything in labeled folders. I'd always respected his space, but those days were clearly over. It took me 20 minutes to find his account statements, hidden in a locked drawer I opened with the spare key we kept for emergencies. What I found made me physically ill. Credit card statements, loan documents, second mortgages. Derek had apparently been financing a lifestyle I knew nothing about. Expensive restaurants, jewelry purchases, hotel stays, all while telling me we needed to budget carefully for our future. And worse, much worse, he'd taken out a second mortgage on our house 3 months ago. The house that contained every penny of my inheritance from my grandmother, which had formed the bulk of our down payment. I sank to the floor, statements scattered around me, trying to make sense of it all. That's when my phone buzzed again. Derek had sent a picture of himself looking bored in what appeared to be a conference room with the caption, "Kill me now. 2 more days of this." The image was clearly downloaded. The lighting didn't match the timestamp, and I could see a hotel logo watermark he hadn't bothered to crop out completely. A rage I'd never known began to build inside me. I spent the rest of the evening digging deeper. Bank statements, credit reports, loan documents. I pulled everything. By midnight I had the complete picture. Derek had accumulated over $175,000 in debt, using our home as collateral. He'd been living a double life for at least the past year, possibly longer. And Melissa wasn't just a fling. Based on their social media history, they'd been seeing each other for at least 8 months. She worked at the bank where Derek had his business accounts. I found several dinner receipts for the steakhouse near her office. As I sat surrounded by the paper trail of my husband's betrayal, something shifted inside me. The initial shock and heartbreak began to crystallize into something harder, colder, and more focused. "So you want to play games, Derek?" I whispered to the empty house. "Fine. Let's play." I may have been an easy mark as a wife, but as an accountant who specialized in forensic financial analysis, I was about to become Derek Harmon's worst nightmare. I picked up the phone and called the one person I knew would understand completely. "Aunt Vivian? It's Olivia. I need your help." My aunt, semi-retired attorney and the shrewdest woman I've ever known, answered on the second ring despite the late hour. "Olivia? What's wrong, sweetheart?" "Everything," I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. But not for long. Part 2. Aunt Vivian arrived at my doorstep the next morning at 7 a.m. sharp, dressed in her signature charcoal pantsuit and carrying a leather briefcase that had seen the inside of more courtrooms than most judges. At 72, she moved with the precision and purpose of someone half her age. "Coffee first, then strategy," she announced, marching past me into the kitchen she'd visited countless times for Sunday dinners. Dinners where Derek had charmed her with his attentive questions about her legal career. I'd barely slept, spending most of the night organizing Derek's financial paperwork into a timeline of deception. The coffee I'd made at 5 a.m. was nuclear strong, exactly how Aunt Vivian liked it. "You look terrible," she observed, pouring herself a cup. "Thanks. I feel worse." She took a sip, nodded approvingly at the coffee's strength, then fixed me with her courtroom stare. "Have you confronted him?" "Not yet. He thinks I'm still clueless at home while he's supposedly at his conference. He's due back tomorrow evening." Aunt Vivian nodded. "Good. Element of surprise is crucial. Now show me everything." I spread the documents across the dining table, our wedding present from Derek's parents, who'd always treated me with cool politeness that I now recognized as something closer to pity. "This is the second mortgage he took out 3 months ago," I explained, pointing to the document bearing both our signatures, one of which was definitely not mine. "And here are the credit card statements showing withdrawals in Miami, New York, and Los Angeles over the past year, all during times he told me he was at regional conferences." Aunt Vivian examined the forged signature, her expression darkening. "Forgery, fraud, identity theft. Your husband's been busy." She looked up at me. "This is criminal, Olivia. Not just divorce territory." "I know," I said quietly. "But I don't want him in jail. I want him exposed, and I want what's rightfully mine." A small smile played at the corner of her mouth. "That's my girl. Now tell me about this other woman." "Melissa Carter. Works at First National where Derek has his business accounts. Based on social media, they've been together at least 8 months, maybe longer." Aunt Vivian tapped her manicured nails on the table. "And does Miss Carter know Derek is married?" I pulled up Melissa's Instagram profile on my tablet. "Oh, she knows. Look at this post from Valentine's Day." The photo showed a lavish bouquet of roses with the caption, "When he can't take you to dinner because he's working late, but still makes you feel special. Hashtag secret love, hashtag complicated, hashtag word hit." Aunt Vivian snorted. "Charming. Both of them." We spent the next several hours creating a comprehensive map of Derek's financial deceptions. By noon, the picture was clear. Derek had been systematically draining our resources while creating the illusion of a frugal life with me. The second mortgage on our house was just the tip of the iceberg. "What I don't understand," I said, staring at the numbers, "is where all this money is going. Even with the vacations and gifts for Melissa, these withdrawals don't add up." "People like Derek usually have a bigger plan," Aunt Vivian mused. "This feels like he's building toward something." My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Conference wrapping up tomorrow. Can't wait to get home to you." I showed it to Aunt Vivian, who rolled her eyes dramatically. "Well, at least we know where he isn't." "I need more information," I decided. "I need to know what he's planning." Legally speaking, I should advise caution, Aunt Vivian said. Then she smiled wickedly. But as your aunt, I say we get creative. Our first stop was my workplace. I'd called Jen that morning, explaining I needed a personal day but might stop by to pick up some files. What I didn't mention was that those files included our firm's client list, specifically the small businesses we handled accounting for. You think Derek has hidden accounts with one of your clients? Aunt Vivian asked as we drove to Lambert and Associates. Not exactly. But our firm works with virtually every bank in the Portland area. I need access to some specialized software, and a friend who owes me a favor. That friend was Ryan Delgado, our firm's IT specialist and a man whose marriage I had inadvertently saved last year by helping him track down financial discrepancies in his household accounts that turned out to be his wife's surprise savings for their anniversary trip. Ryan didn't ask questions when I requested temporary elevated access to our financial tracking software. He simply handed me an encrypted USB drive and wished me luck with my special project. Back at home, I connected to several banking databases through the firm's secure portal. What I found confirmed my suspicions. Derek had opened 3 additional accounts under slightly varied names: D. Harmon Consulting, Dage Enterprises and Harmon Investment Group. Hardly creative with the names, is he? Aunt Vivian remarked, peering over my shoulder. He didn't need to be. He wasn't hiding them from investigation, he was hiding them from me. The accounts painted a disturbing picture. Derek had been moving substantial sums between them, building up a significant balance in the Harmon Investment Group account. Look at this, I pointed to a series of transfers. He's been consolidating funds in this one account. Almost $220,000. Getting ready to run, Aunt Vivian said grimly. Classic exit strategy. My throat tightened. You think he's planning to leave me? Sweetheart, he's in Mexico with another woman while draining your joint assets. I'd say he's already left you in every way except officially. The harsh truth hung in the air between us. I'd been so focused on the financial betrayal that I hadn't fully processed the death of my marriage. I need air, I said, pushing back from the computer. We walked around the neighborhood, the friendly, tree-lined streets where Derek and I had once dreamed of raising children. Mrs. Abernathy waved from her garden. The Henderson kids zoomed past on bikes. Normal life continuing while mine imploded. You know what bothers me most? I said as we rounded the corner back to our street. It's not even the affair. It's that he's been looking me in the eye for years, telling me we needed to budget carefully, making me feel guilty about wanting to renovate the kitchen or take a vacation, while he's been living it up with her. Men like Derek don't see women as equals, Olivia. They see them as either conquests or conveniences. You were the convenient wife who provided respectability and managed the home. Melissa is the conquest. And what happens when Melissa becomes inconvenient? Aunt Vivian squeezed my hand. Exactly. Which is why we're going to make sure you come out of this with everything you deserve. By evening, our plan was taking shape. Based on the account activity, Derek appeared to be preparing for a major move within the next 2 weeks, likely after his supposed return from the conference. We need to act before he does, I said, studying the calendar. And I think I know just how to do it. My cell phone rang, Derek's smiling face appearing on the screen. I answered with forced cheerfulness. Hey honey. How's the conference? Brutal. He lied smoothly. Just got out of the last session for today. Some guy from Seattle talked for 3 hours about tax code revisions. In the background I could clearly hear waves and music. Nothing like a conference center. Sounds fascinating, I replied. When does your flight get in tomorrow? Around 6 p.m. I should be home by 8 if traffic isn't bad. Perfect. I'll make your favorite dinner. I've missed you. Missed you too, babe. Listen, gotta run. Dinner with the regional managers. After he hung up, I looked at Aunt Vivian. Did you hear that? She nodded. Every lying word. He'll be home tomorrow night expecting his dutiful wife. Aunt Vivian's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. And instead he'll find us. That night, after Aunt Vivian left for her hotel, promising to return early the next morning, I sat alone in what I'd thought was my happy home. Photos of Derek and me smiled down from the walls, hiking in the Columbia River Gorge, celebrating New Year's in Seattle, planting the cherry tree in our backyard. I took out my laptop and clicked through property records, bank statements and loan documents, looking for anything we might have missed. That's when I found it, buried in the fine print of our mortgage refinancing from last year. Without my knowledge, Derek had changed the title on our house from joint tenancy to tenancy in common with unequal shares, giving himself 90% ownership. The discovery should have devastated me. Instead, it crystallized my resolve. This wasn't just about his affair or his lies. This was about my future, my security, my dignity. I picked up my phone and texted Jen from work. Need a huge favor. Can you cover for me tomorrow? Say I called in sick but you've been in touch and I'll have the Peterson file done by Monday. Her reply came quickly, of course. Everything okay? No, I typed honestly. But it will be. I'll explain everything next week. I spent the rest of the night preparing, my accountant's mind cataloging assets, documenting transactions, creating backup copies of everything. By dawn I was exhausted but clear-headed. As the sun rose over our quiet neighborhood, I made one last call. Portland First National Bank Mortgage Department, this is Melissa speaking. How may I help you? Hello, Melissa, I said pleasantly. This is Olivia Harmon. I believe you know my husband, Derek. The silence on the other end was deafening. Part 3. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Melissa finally stammered, her voice higher than it had been during her professional greeting. That's strange, I replied, keeping my tone conversational. Since you posted those lovely photos of the two of you in Cancún yesterday. The sunset kiss was particularly artistic. Another long pause. Look, I don't know what Derek has told you about our relationship, but he's told me absolutely nothing, I cut in. Just like he apparently told you nothing about his wife. Or did you know all along, Melissa? This is inappropriate. I need to go. Before you hang up, I said quickly, you might want to know about the second mortgage he took out on our house. And the credit card debt. Oh, and the investment account he's been building up to leave the country. Were you planning on going with him, or are you just another person he's using? The sharp intake of breath told me everything. She hadn't known. What investment account? She asked, her voice suddenly small. I have to wonder, I continued, ignoring her question, what your bank would think about an employee helping a client commit fraud and identity theft. Because that's what he's done, Melissa. And there's a paper trail leading right to you. I never helped him do anything illegal, she protested. We just fell in love. I supplied. How romantic. Is that why you processed the loan documents with my forged signature? I didn't know it was forged. He said you were busy and had authorized him to sign. I allowed myself a small smile. Thank you for confirming that, Melissa. I've been recording this call, which is legal in Oregon as long as one party consents. I consent. You bitch, she hissed. No, I'm an accountant. And now I'm going to be late for a meeting with my lawyer. Enjoy the rest of your vacation. I ended the call and turned to find Aunt Vivian standing in the doorway, slow clapping. Remind me never to cross you, she said with undisguised admiration. That was masterful. She knew, I said flatly. She knew he was married. Of course she did. But more importantly, she just admitted to processing fraudulent loan documents. That gives us leverage. Will the recording hold up? Legally? Maybe not. But we don't need it to hold up in court. We just need it to scare her. And from what I just heard, mission accomplished. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of activity. Aunt Vivian made calls to her network of legal associates while I gathered final documentation and prepared for Derek's return. By late afternoon we were ready. At 7:45 p.m., headlights swept across the living room curtains. I sat in Derek's favorite chair facing the door with Aunt Vivian positioned more subtly in the dining room. We'd agreed I would lead the confrontation. This was my marriage, my home, my battle to fight. The key turned in the lock. Derek entered, rolling his carry-on suitcase, his face arranged in the mask of exhausted business traveler I'd seen countless times before. Hey babe, he called, not yet seeing me in the dimly lit room. Sorry I'm late. Flight was delayed and traffic was. He stopped abruptly when I switched on the lamp beside me. Welcome home, Derek, I said calmly. How was Cancún? The change in his expression would have been comical under different circumstances. Shock, confusion, calculation, and finally, an attempt at righteous indignation. What are you talking about? I was in Chicago. I smiled thinly. That's strange because according to Melissa Carter's Instagram, you were catching some sun on Mexican beaches. You got a little burned on your nose, by the way. His hand instinctively went to his peeling nose, then dropped. He forced a laugh. Hey, you got me. It was a surprise work retreat. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd be upset about the money, but the company paid for everything. Interesting theory, I nodded. Except Melissa isn't a colleague, is she? Unless First National Bank has merged with your firm. Derek's eyes darted around the room, noticing the papers spread across the dining table, landing briefly on Aunt Vivian, who offered a small, predatory wave. You've been busy in my absence, he said, voice hardening. Not as busy as you've been over the last year, I countered, rising from the chair to face him. Multiple bank accounts, credit cards I knew nothing about, a second mortgage with my forged signature, and best of all, changing our house title to give yourself 90% ownership. His expression shifted again, the pretense falling away, replaced by cold calculation. You went through my private papers. You stole from me and committed fraud in my name. I did what I had to do, he said, his voice taking on a defensive edge I'd heard whenever he felt cornered. You and your cautious approach to everything, we would never get ahead with your constant worrying about budgets and savings. And how's that working out? $175,000 in debt, Derek. That's getting ahead. It's called leveraging, he snapped. Something you've never understood with your small-town accounting mentality. I have investments that are about to pay off. You mean the $220,000 you've been consolidating in the Harmon Investment Group account? The money you were planning to disappear with? That stopped him cold. His eyes narrowed dangerously. You had no right. I had every right. It's my name on those fraudulent documents too. Derek set his jaw, dropping all pretense. What do you want, Olivia? Money? A divorce? Fine, we'll split what's left. But this house is mostly mine now legally. Actually, Aunt Vivian spoke up, stepping forward, that's where you're wrong, Mr. Harmon. Derek's head snapped toward her. This doesn't concern you, Vivian. Oh, but it does. You see, title changes obtained through fraud are invalid. As are loans secured with forged signatures. As is identity theft. She smiled pleasantly. I've already filed emergency injunctions freezing all your accounts, including your little nest egg. The banks were quite cooperative once they saw the evidence of fraud. The color drained from Derek's face. You're bluffing. She's not, I said quietly. We've spent the day with bank officers, the mortgage company, and the police. They're particularly interested in the forged documents. You called the cops on me? Derek's voice rose incredulously. Your own husband? Ex-husband, I corrected. Or he will be very soon. And I didn't press charges. Yet. That depends entirely on what happens in the next 24 hours. Derek laughed bitterly. So that's your play? Blackmail. I prefer to call it negotiation, I replied, sliding a folder across the coffee table toward him. Everything you need to know is in there. My terms are simple. You transfer the house title back to joint tenancy, you surrender all claims to my inheritance portion of our assets, you assume full responsibility for the debts you've accumulated, and you agree to an uncontested divorce on my terms. And why would I agree to any of that? He sneered. Because if you don't, I press charges for fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation. Melissa has already provided a statement confirming you forged my signature on loan documents. Melissa would never. She already did. I cut him off, holding up my phone. This afternoon, actually. She was quite upset to learn about your exit strategy that didn't include her. Derek's face contorted with rage. You had no right to contact her. Just like you had no right to empty our savings while sleeping with a bank employee who helped you commit fraud? I countered. Face it, Derek. It's over. You lost. For a moment I thought he might lunge at me. His hands curled into fists and something ugly flashed in his eyes. Something I'd never seen before. You think you're so clever, he hissed. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Actually, I do, I said evenly. That's the problem. I know exactly what you're capable of now. The tense standoff was broken by the chime of the doorbell. Derek flinched. That would be Nathan Cooper, Aunt Vivian said pleasantly. District attorney and my former colleague. He's here as a personal favor, to witness your signing of these documents and to hear your confession regarding the forgeries. If you choose not to cooperate, he'll be taking you downtown instead." Derek looked from Aunt Vivian to me, trapped and desperate. "This is insane. You're my wife." "I was your wife," I corrected him. "Now I'm the woman you tried to destroy. Sign the papers, Derek." I'll never forget the moment Derek Harmon realized he'd lost everything. The mask of charming confidence he'd worn throughout our marriage cracked completely, revealing the frightened, small man beneath. "You'll regret this," he muttered, but his eyes told a different story as he reached for the pen Aunt Vivian held out. "I already regret the last 8 years," I replied. "But not what happens next." As Derek began signing the documents under the watchful eye of Nathan Cooper, who joined us in the living room, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "He told me you knew about us and were fine with it. That you were sick and didn't want intimacy anymore. I'm sorry. I showed the message to Aunt Vivian, who shook her head in disgust. "The classics never go out of style," she murmured. "You okay?" I watched as Derek, defeated and diminished, initialed page after page of the documents that would undo his schemes and free me from his web of lies. "I'm getting there," I said. Part 4. Completion 6 months later. To new beginnings, Aunt Vivian proclaimed, raising a glass of champagne. I clinked my glass against hers, watching the afternoon light stream through the newly installed kitchen windows, part of a renovation I've always wanted to do and finally accomplished. "And for the expert legal help," I added with a smile. It's been 6 months since the night Derek dropped his claim to our house and admitted his debts. As expected, the next day he tried to get out of our agreement, claiming that he was forced, but Aunt Vivian had anticipated this move. The recorded confession and testimony of Nathan Cooper rendered any such statements useless. The divorce was finalized in record time. Derek, faced with the threat of criminal prosecution if he challenged anything, completely gave up. He left Portland a few weeks later, rumored to be heading to Florida with what little was left of his assets after creditors got their way. As for Melissa, she was quietly fired from the bank. I no longer felt any particular dislike for her. She was also deceived, although at first at her request. According to her tearful phone call a few weeks after the collapse of everything, Derek told her intricate stories about his unhappy marriage to a cold, unloving wife. The classic scenario. "Have you heard anything from him?" Aunt Vivian asked, settling into one of the new bar stools by my kitchen island. "Not directly. Jen saw him from work last month when she was in Miami for her sister's wedding. She said he works as a sales manager at a luxury car dealership." "That's a good place," Aunt Vivian snorted. "All the glitter, no substance." I ran my hand over the smooth quartz countertop, another renovation that I completed with the money I managed to recover from Derek's network of accounts before everything was frozen and claimed by creditors. "You know what's weird?" I thought about it. Sometimes I still find myself looking over my shoulder, expecting him to show up and somehow take it all away from me. "Trauma leaves traces," Aunt Vivian said softly. "But you handled it with more dignity and strength than most people could have imagined." I wasn't so sure about dignity. I had a lot of breakdowns, nights spent crying into my pillow, days when I could barely function at work. The humiliation of explaining to friends and family what happened. Introspection, how could I not know? The fear that I will never trust my own judgment again. But I survived. More than I survived, I fought and won. My phone rang with a message from Ryan, my colleague from the IT department, who helped me access those crucial financial records. "Is dinner still on tomorrow? I found a new Thai restaurant in the center." I smiled and typed back, "Of course. I'll pick you up at 7. Aunt Vivian raised an eyebrow. "An IT guy? It's not what you think," I protested, feeling the color rise to my cheeks. "We're just friends." She purred meaningfully. "Friends who have been having dinner together every Friday for the last 2 months." "He was there when everything was falling apart," I said defensively. "And he went through a divorce himself. He understands." "I'm not judging, dear. I'm celebrating. Life goes on as it should be." The doorbell interrupted our conversation. I wasn't expecting anyone. "Probably another estimate from the bathroom contractor," I said, heading for the door. When I opened the door, I froze. Melissa Carter was standing on my porch, looking nothing like the carefree beach babe from those Instagram photos. Her hair was pulled back into a severe ponytail, her face was makeup-free and worried. "Hi, Olivia," she said hesitantly. "I know I'm the last person you want to see, but I need to talk to you." I felt Aunt Vivian silently appear behind me, a protective presence. "What can we talk about?" I asked, not hiding my coldness. Melissa swallowed hard. "About Derek. He returned to Portland. And he tells people that you set him up." A chill ran through me despite the warm spring day. "It's not my problem anymore." "Maybe it is," she said urgently. "He's different. Possessed. He contacts me sometimes late at night, saying he's going to get everything back from you." I started to close the door. "Thanks for the warning, but I have restraining orders and security cameras. I'm not afraid of Derek anymore." "Wait," she begged. "There's something else. He told me about other offshore accounts. The money he hid before everything collapsed. He uses them to restore his image by telling mutual acquaintances that you forged documents to frame him." Stopped me. "Why are you telling me this?" She lowered her gaze, then looked into my eyes with surprising directness. "Because I was wrong. Because what we did to you is unforgivable. And because I think he's dangerous right now." I studied her face, looking for deception or manipulation. When I couldn't find anything, I reluctantly backed away. "You can come in." Over the next 30 minutes, Melissa shared everything she knew. Details about the accounts in the Cayman Islands, Derek's increasingly erratic behavior, and his obsession with revenge. "He keeps saying that he created you and he can just as easily destroy you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "At first I didn't take it seriously, but last week he showed up at my apartment at 2 a.m. drunk, saying that he had a plan to prove that you had committed fraud, not him." Aunt Vivian, who had remained skeptically silent throughout Melissa's story, finally spoke up. "Do you have any documentation about these offshore accounts?" Melissa nodded, pulling a thumb drive out of her purse. "Everything I could find. Account numbers and transfer dates. I still had access to some of his old emails." I picked up the drive, our fingers touching for a moment during the transfer. It was strange to be so close to the woman who was part of the destruction of my marriage, even though in hindsight she might have inadvertently saved me from many more years of deception. "Why are you really doing this?" I asked. Melissa met my gaze firmly. "Because I was raised better than I behaved. Because my mom wouldn't recognize the person I became with Derek. And because," she hesitated, "I now know what it feels like to feel unsafe in my own life." After she left, Aunt Vivian and I examined the contents of the thumb drive. Indeed, it contained detailed records of offshore transfers dating back almost 2 years. Small amounts strategically moved to avoid detection. "That makes a difference," Aunt Vivian said gloomily. "If he has hidden resources and resentment, we need to be proactive." That night, after Aunt Vivian left, promising to contact Nathan Cooper again, I sat alone in my newly renovated kitchen, thinking about how quickly life could change, for the worse but also for the best. My phone rang. Ryan was checking on me as he often did in the evenings. "Is everything okay? You seemed distracted at work today." I hesitated, then decided to be honest. "Derek is back in Portland. With money and a thirst for revenge." There was a pause. "Should I come?" "I can be there in 20 minutes." The offer was tempting, but I shook my head even though he couldn't see me. "No, it's fine. Aunt Vivian has already activated her legal network. We can handle it." "Are you sure?" "Because I would worry less if I were around." His concern warmed me up. "I appreciate it, really. But I'm fine. Derek may be a threat, but he's also a coward. And anyway, I'm no longer the naive woman he married himself to." "That's for sure," Ryan said with a hint of pride in his voice. "You're one of the strongest people I know, Olivia Harmon." After we said goodbye, I went around the house, checking the locks and the alarm system which I installed shortly after the divorce. I knew that Derek might try to do something, but I also knew that I was no longer a victim. 3 days later, Derek's plan began to unfold when my boss was visited by federal agents with questions about the violations allegedly committed by me. Fortunately, thanks to Melissa's information and Aunt Vivian's legal foresight, we've already brought Derek's offshore accounts to the FBI's attention. The investigation lasted 2 tense weeks, but it didn't end the way Derek had hoped. Instead of seeing me in handcuffs, he was arrested himself for tax fraud, money laundering, and attempted obstruction of justice. Offshore accounts were frozen, and a broader investigation into his financial dealings began. When his apartment was searched, the agents found a detailed revenge plan directed against me, including threats that shifted from civil law to criminal law. 2 years later, "Pass the salad, please," I said, gesturing to a large ceramic bowl at the other end of the table. Ryan pushed it over with a smile. "I still can't believe you grew all this in your garden." "Our hands," I corrected him, watching the summer sun play in his dark hair. The ring on my left hand caught the sunlight, casting small rainbows on the wall of our kitchen. It's been 2 years since Derek was sentenced to 5 years for the totality of his financial crimes. Melissa moved to Seattle, periodically sending me emails about her new life and career at a nonprofit organization. A strange and unexpected friendship that emerged from the ashes of destruction. I no longer worked at Lambert & Associates. Instead, I opened my own small consulting firm specializing in helping people, especially women, sort out their finances after a divorce or the loss of a partner. Aunt Vivian, who had partially come out of retirement due to her renewed interest in law practice, often referred clients to me. Ryan left his job in IT to join my firm as a technology partner, creating software to track hidden financial transactions. After a year of working together, our partnership grew into something more, and 6 months ago we got married in a quiet ceremony in Aunt Vivian's garden. As far as I knew, Derek was still serving his sentence, but I no longer wasted energy thinking about him. Sometimes I still woke up from nightmares of him standing over my bed or taking over our house, but these dreams came less and less often. "What are you thinking about?" Ryan asked, noticing my distant look. "About how strange things are going," I replied, covering his hand with mine. 3 years ago I thought my life was ruined. It turned out that it was just beginning. He squeezed my hand. "Do you know what I love most about you? My brilliant fraud detection skills?" I was joking. "Your ability to see value in a complex equation," he said seriously. "You understand that sometimes we have to go through the hardest trials to find the real sum of our lives." I smiled, thinking about all the twists and turns that led to this moment. A peaceful evening with a man who saw right through me and loved everything he saw. "So," Ryan said, sipping his lemonade, "Aunt Vivian says we might be approached by a TV network about our job. Something about a documentary series about financial fraud. Are you interested?" I laughed. "Maybe. But I think our stories are best told by those who have experienced them. I'd rather help people write their own endings." He raised his glass. "For writing your own endings." I raised mine, clinking glasses with him. "And for the price of lying, which always pays in the end." Think.